And welcome to this special edition of the Armstrong-Williams Show. You know, nearly every American has a relationship with two federal agencies, whether they realize it or not: the Internal Revenue Service and the Social Security Administration. One collects the taxes that fund our government, the other safeguards the retirement, disability, and survival benefits millions of people depend upon in this country. For decades, both agencies have faced criticism over customer service, long wait lines, we know about those wait times, outdated technology, fraud, and public distrust. Today, guess who we're joined by? Frank BISIGNANO, who's the Commissioner of the Social Security and Chief Executive Officer of the IRS. You know, before entering public service, I must tell you, he has one of the most impressive resumes I've ever seen. I mean, it's just really blows you away. He transformed some of America's largest financial institutions, led recovery efforts after September 11th, survived cancer linked to Ground Zero, and built a career solving some of the most complex operational challenges in the private and public sector. Today, it isn't about politics. It's really about results. And so, can government deliver the same level of service, innovation, security, and accountability Americans expect from the private sector? Let's begin. Welcome so much.
Thanks for having me.
Our broadcast. Commissioner, you led American Express, Citigroup, JP Morgan, Chase, First Data, and Fishery. Most successful executives never leave the private sector. Why did you accept what many consider to be one of the toughest jobs in government?
Well, I wasn't actually thinking about ever doing this. And I was fortunate to receive a phone call that asked me to come see the president-elect. And I did. My wife was hugely encouraging. I always had a regret in life, and I tried my hardest to fulfill it in many ways, that I never served in the military. My grandfather came to America and joined the U.S. Army to become a citizen, fought in World War I. My dad was an orphan, fought in World War II, and served the country for 44 years in the Treasury Department. And as life had it, I went on and had a career. And I had the fortunate opportunity to create military programs, 100,000 jobs mission, which turned into 2 million plus jobs, bringing people back to work. First programs to award houses to wounded warriors. And when someone, God rest his soul, like General Odierno, who was the chief of staff, would put his arm around me and thank me for the military programs, I said, I won't deserve any thanks. It's all you that deserve the thanks. I have one regret: I've never served. So I had a wonderful job running a very large company, very successful company, great bunch of teammates. Anything you get done is a team.
Yeah, but you know what is fascinating? You're running an even larger business now. And I'm just curious, what problem did you believe needed fixing most urgently when you arrived at SSA and the IRS?
Serving the American public. Serving the American public. You know, in 24, at times it was high as 40 minutes to wait on the phone. Ooh. On average. Average means there were people on there much longer. I got a note this morning, a year-to-date average is 6.9 minutes. So from 40 in 24 at times, a full-year average of 28. We're down to less than 7 right now. And we're serving way more people. I also realized that we needed to be a digital-first agency. and that would be true at IRS and SSA. We need to transact the way people transact every day. And not everybody wants to come to a field office. So much like in financial institutions, we'd say we're going to meet our clients where they want to be met. Well, that's our slogan here. We're going to meet our clients where they want to be met. And only 4% of our transactions happen in field offices now, right? And we're going to do over 800 million transactions this year with, between the phone and the online capability, 96% of those.
So how has your experience leading companies processing trillions of dollars prepared you for leading the IRS and Social Security?
Well, it's really interesting. The president asked me to do this job. I was honored to do it. And when I got here, I figured out, holy mackerel, the good Lord put me here. The good Lord gave me all this preparedness in big payment companies and big service companies and companies with large branch networks to serve the country. And so it's always about teams for me. And we've put together a great leadership team. The organization now has a little bit of swagger at Social Security. Oh, wow. And my definition of swagger is,
I get it.
North of confident, south of arrogant, but feeling they're winning. They're winning. They're getting. We took all the Inspector General reports, and they said there was about 18 billion of costs being lost, and all of that in a year. There's 300 million left of that.
Wow.
Right?
So I spoke with you earlier, and you literally just flew in here, but you witnessed 9/11 firsthand and later battled cancer linked to Ground Zero. In fact, you had your checkup and heard what you needed to hear. How did those experiences shape your leadership? You were there.
Well, there is nothing better than preparation. Mm-hmm. And whether it was the 2008 crisis when I was at JP Morgan or 9/11, we always prepared. We actually had a plan for if the towers went down. Now, that did not make us the smartest people in the world because the towers were bombed once. Just like we had a plan for if a bank failed at JP Morgan, well, we saw the cracking of it in 2007 with some failures going on. So, the best way to succeed is to prepare. Then, you never know when it's going to happen or how it's going to happen. I'll never forget that morning. I'll never forget where I was. 7 World Trade Center, those people in 7 World Trade were my responsibility. We had 16,000 people in Lower Manhattan. We lost 6, and I'll never forget that. But we got everybody else out safe, and 7 World Trade Center went to the ground. So I saw the second plane hit. I saw the hole in the first one, and I knew we had to get out of Lower Manhattan.
What is the one thing that everyday Americans neglect to understand to make their experiences more welcoming and less frustrating as it relates to the IRS and the SSA, the do's and the don'ts, just simple things?
Well, I think the first thing is there's a wealth of knowledge out on the web in both agencies. I also think there's physical presence that people can come to, and we're always available. And I think, people in both agencies believe they're here to help the American public. And many times, these are complicated financial transactions. They're not simple transactions. We have almost 1,000 administrative judges who ultimately are the final word,
the arbiter,
on disability cases. I think for a very long time, Social Security was misrepresented in how it was defined. Up to the day I got there. 74 million Americans receiving $1.6 trillion in benefits. But I just talked about 800 million transactions. Our field office visits are not from the 74 million Americans collecting their payments. They're from everybody from someone who needs a replacement card to get their first job and working papers, to someone who just got married and their name changed, to someone who needs a document and they don't have a printer at home and they want to print out what their actual Social Security benefit is, or their income. People going online, changing their address. And so we serve over 300 million Americans. We serve over 300 million Americans, and we're in 100% of America's retirement plans. And on top of it, we have 104 million digital users. We are the largest digital financial institution in the world. I like that definition better. And yes, we are paying 74 million Americans $1.6 trillion.
So
it was trivializing the workforce. The workforce likes my definition better because it defines what they do, not some component of it. I'm not making the payment. By the way, you know, the world's much different. People used to, you know, in 35, we wrote out checks. Today, 99% are direct deposit from the computer.
So you know, you're saying a lot in the opening of this show. So let me. So when history judges you, your tenure, what do you hope that Americans will say changed because you served in this capacity?
I think what they'll say is we converted to modern day transformation like every American's being used to be served in every other way they act. And that their books and records were accurate. We reconciled the Social Security number database. It was never called that. It was called the Numinate. And everybody questioned, you know, the president saying people were 160 years old, they were on the file. Well, they were. There was more than a 10% error rate on that file.
10%?
It had never, but that's on 300 plus million records, right? And so we created a risk department. This is where there's no substitute for experience. My friends always laugh of people who I worked 40 years, 30 years, 20 years ago, and I always say, well, they say, why didn't that person know it? I said, they never had the experience. It's true in the private sector.
Well, it's true everywhere.
It's true everywhere in life.
Hold that. The man, not a myth. He's real. I'm Armstrong Williams, and we'll be back with much more. You know, we've interviewed many people on this platform. It's always refreshing to see people in positions in this administration who actually have the qualifications and their lives have prepared them for this. And certainly that is the case with our guests. Because let me tell you, millions of Americans depend on Social Security every month. For many, it isn't simply a government program, Mr. Administrator. It is their financial lifeline, is what it is. Americans remember waiting nearly an hour on hold. And today, those wait times have dropped dramatically, as you just described. Let's talk about the disability backlog, which has fallen substantially, and what changed operationally.
Well, you know, one of the most, I took a month and a half before I announced one change organizationally, and instead I announced a whole new organization. And I took a judge in the disability group that was acting over a portion of it, Judge Jay, and I told him he was going to be on the cover of Disability Weekly. That's a paper I made up. I don't think it exists, but he was highly motivated. And I said, we're going to run a front-to-back organizational structure. There's never been one person in charge of the whole organization. And as he said, he brought some bread and butter management to it. We brought technology to it. We run the whole org with a discipline that you would in the private sector. You know, a weekly key indicator meeting across the whole org that covers 270 indicators. I sit in it, and every chief that reports to me does. So their numbers are front and center, and that's the people underneath come and present their data. And we help them solve their problems. Right? We're not there as bureaucrat, administrators, overseers. No, we like to roll up our sleeves to get work done, and we now have a leadership team that does it. So, you know, I give a big shout out to Judge Jay. He's obviously was originally a judge and came through the ranks of the disability org. It was never all one organizational structure.
You know, it's interesting because you begun reconciling Social Security records, removing deceased individuals, and updating the citizenship information. So why was this so important for you?
Well, I always think source data drives everything. You know, I ran companies called like First Data. I mean, we had 40% of the payment records. If you don't have every one of them right, we ultimately create an index called the Small Business Index. We thought America wanted to know how small businesses are doing, right? So those were things, and when I looked at this is a data-rich environment. We have, by the letter of the law, created more data sharing agreements than ever before across the federal government. That's the great leadership of President Trump. You know, bring people who want to work together to get better outcomes. So I thought, by the way, the name of the Social Security number database was the Numinant. Did you ever hear of the Numinant? Is that a word you would know? Somebody's like, we're checking the Numinant. I'm like, what's the Numinant? They told me, I said, that's the Social Security number database. Has it been reconciled? No. Okay, we're going to have a risk group that'll reconcile it. By the way, there's nothing unusual about that. Somebody else with my background would have made the same exact decision, right?
So you know, fraud, Mr. Administrator, against Social Security isn't victimless, actually. You know, how large is the problem today, and what are you doing to alleviate it?
Well, you know, why am I keep talking about the Social Security number database? You know, it didn't mean that people were getting Social Security payments. It meant they had a number that was live in a system that they could use that wasn't them.
Really?
That's what the real crime was. And that's why when you hear, I mean, the work that goes on in IRS, we have a great crowd, you know, criminal investigators who go after fraud. And now the way we've structured, you know, under Vice President Vance, you know, the fraud task force, it's bringing all of it together. You know, if you were running a company, you would bring everything together to find your issues. You just don't do it in a corner here, a corner there. First time in the history of America you've seen this attack plan. For the betterment of citizens, you'll end up with less identity theft here.
You know, AI is a big deal, Mr. Administrator. You know, how are artificial intelligence and technology improving, let's say, service without replacing the human being today?
Well, I think a couple things. I mean, AI, you could go back and see me 7 years ago saying, you know, or 5 years ago too, we were using AI before it was called AI. So, you know, it's technology, right? It's just hypercharged. You remember when it was like, you know, the internet, right? It was everything, but then it became normal. So it's super advanced technology that allows it to learn. But for us across the government, you know, and I can speak specifically for IRS and Social Security, it's transformative. I mean, AI is about how we went from 40 minutes, but you had to have some other base technology too. You just can't pop up and say AI is going to solve everything. I think in Social Security, people would say our CIO, great guy, I was talking to him at 6:45 this morning, Mike Russo, is the first CIO who actually was a technologist. So putting people in jobs and his ability to do things for us, to get information, to better serve the American public. Now, you'd say we're going to use a lot of AI in all processes, but ultimately we have a human at the end of it.
Yeah.
Right?
You need a human touch.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
you need to make sure that output product is right.
What about?
But it takes all the labor that went into it, right? And so what do? Are you going to get rid of a bunch of people? No, you're going to provide better service. No, you're going to reconcile all the records. You're going to get the work done that was supposed to be done that wasn't being done.
What about those who fear that Social Security cannot sustain itself?
Well, I've came here with one mantra: protect and preserve. And the president's mantra, protect and preserve. And all these building blocks, when I go in and we're going to fix a company, the first thing I do is make sure the operations can work, right? Your operations got to be first class if you're paying out 74 million Americans, 1.6 trillion, right? So before you think about how you're going to move forward, I want to give us a platform that we have to move forward off of. And we're winning that war. And with it, we're extending little, when you change all these numbers, we got a lot of work to do to understand what the next steps are. But we're going to empower the country to have this forever.
What I've found through my experiences when we talk to cabinet secretaries and people who work at the highest levels of government, it's just wrapping themselves around the bureaucracy, the bowels of the government and the bowels of the agencies. In order for you to have the success that you have, you must have your tentacles everywhere throughout the bureaucracy. Talk about how are you able to get the bureaucracy to make these changes, almost unprecedented.
Well,
and the progress.
The first thing is it's a new language, like numinant. That was a new language,
yes.
right? Numinant.
How to use it.
They thought, these people talked about, why did it take, 90 years for somebody to say that's the Social Security number database, right? That's not because I grew up in Brooklyn. It's just, it's appropriate. So where I'm going with that is people would always say, well, policy. People tell me policy. I'd be like, well, I never had a policy department before.
But you have to get these people to buy in.
Yeah, well, they buy in because they actually want to win.
Oh.
They actually want to win.
They wanted to work.
Yeah.
Yes.
They didn't want to be kicked around, think about it. I really believe an injustice was done saying Social Security pays 74 million Americans, where meanwhile we have 880 million transactions, 100 digital users, and it's the #1 identifier. So they were like, wow, he's talking about the work we do now, not the output for people who paid into it for years. There's a lot to this leading. You can't really teach it. You got to learn it in the trenches. How to get people galvanized against an effort to get a better outcome that makes them feel better about themselves. The person there was never a risk department. I've never run an organization that didn't have a risk department. So I created a risk department, and I put a career person in the job. And I was talking about this the other day and the work done on this Social Security number database. The fact we have a Friday afternoon at 3 meeting on any open audit issue. I go to these meetings. I'm in these meetings. I don't delegate it. I want to hear what the people in the org have to say. By the way, I audit.
You're accessible. You're there.
Yeah, well, I don't know that they always love me for being that accessible, because I'm a tough head coach.
So let me say this before we go to break. Obviously, as someone who owns the Baltimore Sun, and we own television stations across the country, you know, I saw this story in a paper that I read, the Wall Street Journal, which is one of my favorite papers, labeling you a spy. You know, I find it hard to believe that you're a spy. You're a lot of things. But
Well,
a spy,
I say,
tell me I'm wrong.
Well, yeah, I mean, I said this. They said I spied on Charlie Scharf. Charlie called me the evening before it was out because it was in the digital version that night, and him and I had a good laugh about it. We're good friends, and I said, you know, it's gonna be pretty cool for my grandkids. You know, they're gonna look through Pop. That's who I am to them, 5 of them. They're gonna look 40 years from now. They're all under 6, and go, man, Pop, he was CEO, great business career. He was a level 1 officer in the federal government, and he spied. I mean, you know, like, of course not. You know, but it's kind of funny. So we laughed about it.
How do these stories get life?
Well, they got somebody who wants to say something. No name sources. J.P. Morgan denies it. We deny it. Everybody says it didn't happen, but they're going to run a story anyway because I work for the president. If I was running Catholic Charities, we probably wouldn't have got that story.
And we'll be right back after this short commercial break. And don't go away. Much more to come. Frank BISIGNANO, you're Italian,
Yeah.
Catholic,
100%.
immigrated from where?
Calabria and Bari. I've been back to both towns that my family is from. I grew up in a multi-generational immigrant household. My Italian grandfather always spoke Italian in the house. And
What did your parents do for a living?
my dad worked 44 years for the federal government. I know all about federal government employees.
That's
I have
fascinating.
a bias towards federal government employees.
Where did your dad work?
He was he was in Treasury, but
Wow.
that was pre-Homeland Security.
But he was in Treasury.
Yeah, he was a customs agent, he was Border Patrol, he was an inspector, he was DEA, and he loved his job. He loved his job. And when I came on the scene and I walked into an auditorium with a bunch of Social Security employees, I said, I have a bias towards federal employees. And they're like, oh, big businessman.
But your bias is a good one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I said, my role model, my dad.
And what did Mom do?
Mom was a homemaker till I was 14, and I was the youngest. I had an older sister who we talk all the time, and we love each other a lot. And Mom then decided she wanted to go to work, and I was a little, you know, we're in the 70s. And, you know, we're an Italian household, and Mom's going to go get a job. And so she learns how to type. She taught herself how to type at home and put together a little journal for something called the Rudder Club. It was maritime. A cousin of ours got her this little gig. And what happens from the gig is Mom was really smart. She was the brains of the outfit. And Dad had instincts that were unparalleled, being one of 15 and an orphan when he was 8. And so Mom then gets a phone call from a stevedoring company. And stevedoring may be like Numinant to some people. They're water cranes that take huge bulk off cargo ships. In ports. And so Mom gets a call, and we live in Brooklyn, she's gonna go down, work in the Brooklyn Navy Yard for a stevedoring company as a receptionist. When Mom passes, she's still, you know, going to work. Dad took care of her, got her back and forth. She had a Parkinson's-like disease. She was the chief operating officer of that company.
Wow.
And you know, she dealt with longshoremen. She dealt with a nice, wonderful, beautiful woman who just knew how to keep it together.
It's thrilling to hear the love and respect for your parents and the foundation that they gave you. You know, more than 150 million returns have already been filed this year. It's a lot. How successful has this filing season been?
It was a blowout season. It was, you know, if you think about it, I think of everything, like we say season, I love sports. I mean, everything's about teams for me. And there were, both at Social Security and in IRS, there were a lot of people before me in short period of time. So however you want to think about it, I was, call it the fifth person from the start of the administration. I get there on October 6th, and we got to deliver a tax season. The changes in OBBB were enacted in July. It's going to be a tough tax season to put, and those are tax changes. And the team was already, you know, they were heads down, knowing we have great seasoned executives on the tech side and the taxpayer service side. But, you know, I brought a different skill set to be a leader there, and not a bureaucrat or just an administrator. And we said we were going to commit to single-digit wait times. We were going to do efficient. Remember, everybody was worried there were 25,000 less people. And we're going to have the biggest tax changes that ever occurred, landmark legislature. How are we going to service it? And we made a series of changes. We built that same process that I talked about at SSA that I would do running a company, create a risk job, it decided how we were going to treat the call centers differently, bringing in more technology, being able to, deliver. And, we were holding ourselves accountable to getting these refunds out early. And, when you looked at the tail of the tape when it was over, the most refunds, the most dollars ever paid quicker to more people, billions of dollars above what anyone even thought it was going to be. The amount of, it's just, yesterday we were finishing up the first time that leadership team at IRS has sat at a table for a strategy meeting since the last decade.
But you reminded me of something here. Refunds increased significantly this year. What explains that?
Well, you had no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and you had the senior deduction. That senior deduction was very powerful. And the president's commitment to the seniors, which is all part of protect and preserve, even though people want to debate all these things, there's no debate. It's really happening. He's delivering for every American. I get the opportunity to serve and do the work to make it happen.
Now, that brings me to something when you mention that, because the Working Families tax cuts introduced major changes. What provisions do you think are taxpayers using most?
Well, Trump accounts is happening right now.
People love Trump accounts. They love the Trump accounts.
We're going to have 70 million.
Even the governor of Maryland, Wes Moore, was praising the Trump accounts.
I like Wes from Robin Hood. He was at Robin Hood back in the day when I was in New York.
But I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, you're good. So I think Trump accounts, you haven't seen the effect of it. The other thing that happened is we didn't reverse the benefits that were already there. That was going to be $5 trillion of more taxes, right? So we kept in force the good provisions that were there that the president had enacted previously, and we came in. Look at the senior deduction matters a lot. I think you're going to see this over time be a benefit to employers and employees, because employees now say, I've heard from car dealers and others, when you go talk to them, people that would think, well, I don't really want to work a Saturday, look at how much I'm taxed on this money. Well, now they got their workers.
Well, what mistake are taxpayers making most often?
Probably filing it 100% accurately, which sometimes you could use free file mechanisms. I mean, the biggest issue is understand. Accurately means making sure you're getting all the benefit. Accurately doesn't mean, you know, that we're saying somebody's cheating or lying. You know, so there's free file options that we have. That we have taxpayer assistance centers. We're there to help people.
So what are the red flags to avoid an audit?
You know, I think it's you're gonna have all your documentation and make sure it's transcribed right. You know.
And transparency.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're building, what do I call it? A digital IRS. What will everyday taxpayers notice first?
Well, I think they noticed it this year. This is the blowout number.
Yeah,
this
okay.
was the service change that nobody imagined would happen because we toiled at creating capability that we didn't have. And we sat around yesterday for a full day talking about what the next tax season is going to be like. We're full in force preparing for that right now. Tax season isn't just end on April 15th or when the extensions and start on the day we say you file. You know, like any championship team, we're training all day, every day to win. So our transactions, our online transactions with the American public were hundreds of millions more than before.
Really?
This year, a 60% increase.
So
telling them where their refund. Where's my refund?
People, they want that refund.
Yeah.
I can tell you that right
Hey,
now. Oh, they want it.
You remember, you know, maybe 6 to 8 weeks in the mail. You remember it takes 6 to 8 weeks in the mail to get a check.
How well do we remember? So
today, 90% direct deposit within 21 days or less.
You know, but I sense that analytics, sort of like AI, is helping protecting these honest taxpayers. I think, is AI playing any kind of role in there?
We're at the we're in the bottom of the first on that right now.
Oh, you are.
Yeah.
So,
but you'll see us. You know, we'll be in full stride and better stride this year.
So will the taxpayers eventually, Frank, be able to handle virtually every IRS transaction online?
Unless there's some anomaly. You know, I did something that I think is really, really important. Last Wednesday, say, I had the largest tax preparers say they do 90% of tax preparation work in the country for individuals, right? Call it TurboTax, H&R Block, all the names you might know. Say there were 8 of them. I had them in for a meeting and talked about how they can do a better job and tell us what they need from us. You know the last time that meeting happened? Never.
Never?
Never.
How's that possible?
It's because...
Leadership.
Yeah.
Leadership.
Instinct, you know?
No, leadership.
Yeah. But, you know, like, I'm like, hey, they could do a better job for us. We're going to tell them what they could do for us. And we can do a better job for them. And then who really gets the better job? The 170 million filers.
Frank BISIGNANO is the Chief Executive Officer of the IRS and runs the Social Security Administration. Unheard of, right? We'll be right back after this short commercial break with much more. Don't go away. You know, I've always learned as a CEO is that technology alone doesn't restore public confidence. Leadership does. Trust does. Accountability does. So public trust in institutions has dramatically declined. How did you rebuild the confidence, the trust, the loyalty at the IRS and the Social Security Administration?
Well, I think if you understand what the work is, people will want to listen to your plan. In neither case have we changed at all the strategy that we start off with. We don't run from one side of the ship to the other. There's something's going to happen on a given day. Stay calm. We're going to deliver the outcome. And so I think leadership matters a lot. And people can see leadership. They understand leadership. They understand BS from non-BS, right? Speaking simply and getting good outcomes. And when you could show up and continually help people see, I think people believe at Social Security, which was a longer time I've been in charge and lived through it more, that the process of performance management and rewards and recognition was the best process they've had in years, if ever, there. So it's not only about, hey, you gotta make people understand what they're doing well and where they could use help. And so if you could, I go to field offices all the time. We have 1,200 plus at Social Security. Our field office people are happy. They don't get happy because I walked in there. They see the change and they can serve the American public better. Yes, we're more demanding on the results, but tech is good, but ultimately, like all types of financial services, and I treat like Social Security and IRS like they're financial services. People want to hear a person's voice to validate what they believe is happening is happening.
The Bible tells us if you find something good, praise it. There's been a lot of good news here today for people watching. But I would be remiss if I did not inquire about the challenges that you face and the things that you've not been able to get your arms around that can make both agencies work better for we the people.
Speed of execution. Speed of execution. We walked away from the IRS meeting just yesterday thinking about, increased speed of execution. Law and policy are departments. And law and policy in my life before there were there to support the business. Now, they're here to support that we do everything within the statute, which wasn't a word I used much before I got here, statute. And I was like, first day somebody said the statute meant the law. I got it. So we're never going to break a law. Policy can be changed, right? Well, the policy made sense in 40 may not make sense
It's outdated
today.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I teased the person who used to be in charge of policy at Social Security that, well, he was the high priest. And I was like, now you have an operating job, and you're stuck with having to change a lot of that policy. So policy change for the betterment of mankind, not to help the American public.
But there's something
So that's different than you would see elsewhere. But you know what? It's all doable. And then the speed of execution, you got to tell people, well, somebody says that'll take 2.5 months. You're like, why can't we do it in 2.5 days?
Wow. Cybersecurity has become one of the federal government's greatest responsibility. How secure is taxpayers' data today?
Well, we did two things. It's highly secure, the securest you're going to find, and that's true at SSA. And the reason why I'm so proud of creating a risk job that reports to me that has a risk management function, and also a cybersecurity job at SSA. I took it from 3 levels down and moved security and resiliency to report directly to me. I was making a statement about how important it was, right? The auditors, the IG, the people would say they never saw a commissioner so engaged in cyber issues to make sure our defense is right. To make sure our defense is right, to protect information. You know, it's the number one job here, protecting information. If you go and see what our mantra is at IRS, it's higher client service, higher collections, and privacy. Privacy. That means protecting everyone's data.
What is it that you would like to leave with the public today that we have not discussed?
Well, I think that we are building something that cannot be broken. This is not, we're building something, a digital future. The ability that they can look online at their money and understand where it is, whether it's Social Security or IRS. That Trump accounts will have 70 million of our children, and half of them probably would have never had exposure to the equity market, and now they will. And it's a vehicle, and the philanthropists you saw what Michael Dell did, you see what Ray Dalio did, the philanthropists are rallying around it. And I think Secretary Besson's done an outstanding job, and I'm working with the team to get this thing up and running and do something great for America's future.
Where do you see us 5 years from now?
I see us looking back at the amount of achievement that was done in this administration. You know, anything, you know this super well, anything that's really going to be good is going to be hard.
Yes.
Right? Like, you know, and one of the things I love, I grew up with, you know, great athletes to look up to, uncles, and I always knew that they always said, make hard plays look easy, Frank. Make hard plays look easy, right? But you got to outwork everybody. And this administration's outworking, this president outworks anybody before him, and this administration's outworking anybody, and we're going to get the results.
Sounds like your mother outworked everybody, going from secretary to CEO. How was that? I had to come back to that. I found that to be
my mom, you know,
what a story.
Skipped school, had 2 years of skipping school, but of course they were immigrants and they didn't know send her to college. Right? So she had in her, you know? She had in her, never said a thing. We had this beautiful home. I never seen my parents have a fight ever. And I really mean that. And it wasn't like our house was one bathroom with 5 people.
How long did it take Mom to go from secretary to CEO?
Well, it was COO, because, I'd say, you know, if she had a 25-year, it was clear after, they were just giving her responsibility. Give it to Anna, you know?
But, you know, it brings me to this. The importance of family, that foundation, has more of an impact on someone's success than anything else.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'd give you this one item. My dad was an orphan. He thought he hit lotto with my mother and her parents. He cared for her parents till their deathbed. They would ask for, my grandmother in her 50s had cancer, and you know, she'd need morphine shot in. It was only my father she wanted to do it. My grandfather lived with us. He was blind. My father, he died. All these people died in the house with us. He died in the house, and my father cared for him. And my mom, my father drove her when she was even in a wheelchair and a walker, drove her to work and picked her up every day. He was this big man who, you know, protected the borders of this country, and that was the love of his life. And people would say, Al, why don't you go out sometimes? You could have a nurse. I'm going to leave her here with somebody else.
Your final thoughts. What would you like for the Americans, if anything they take away from this conversation today, in about a minute, what would it be?
This country has great leadership right now. You know, the president is beyond committed to, you know, having a safer country, a more secure country, and a country that delivers for the people in a manner it hasn't in a very long time.
You know, When I was saying to colleagues today, I was talking to the top flight at the IRS and the SAA. I mean, there is something about it that touches everybody's lives. I mean, they thought that was pretty cool. And we interview a lot of people. But look, you're a fine representative of your parents. They would be so proud. Same way with my parents. I give them all the credit and all the glory to God. But thank you so much for joining us today. I wish you well, and we're glad you're there.
Thank you.
I'm Armstrong Williams on behalf of all of us here on the National News Desk and the Baltimore Sun and the staff. Thank you for joining us for this edition of the Armstrong Williams Show with the man, the boss. We're out of here.